Lebanon is a land that has never been at peace. They have lived through endless struggles since the beginning, and not necessarily against Israel, as we are used to hearing. How did Lebanon become the epicenter of conflicts in the Middle East? Why do so many powers want control over Lebanon? Could Lebanon become the next international battlefield? The tragedy in Lebanon is full of rival power factions hidden from public view that few people know about, and in this video we are going to explain what no one tells you about Lebanon. Who is pulling the strings in Lebanon? To answer this question, I want to tell you a story that goes back to a time when Lebanon did not exist. Let's start our story with the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians and other peoples around Lebanon, we've probably all heard of the Phoenicians, right? The Phoenicians are not only known for their maritime trade, but they also established trading posts all over the Mediterranean. In fact, as a fun fact, the Phoenician base of operations was located in what is now Lebanon, particularly in the area of Sidon, which by the way is a city that is even mentioned in the Torah. To quickly continue with our story, we need to talk a little about the neighbors of the Phoenicians. These neighbors were called the Jews, and they were located in an area that we will call the land of Israel. This ancient people called the Jews, just like the Phoenicians, felt the impact of great empires that passed through there, such as the Assyrians, Babylonia, the Persians, later Alexander the Great, the Hellenists, and the Romans. The Phoenicians had to live through it. To witness the arrival of a young Jew crucified in Jerusalem by Rome, though not in Lebanon and unknown to the Phoenicians, it was near Lebanon, making it relevant. We Jews don't take that event so seriously, although many people in the world do, and they even started a religion around this event, believing that this young man was also the Son of God, and later said that he was God himself incarnate. But this event of the crucifixion of this young Jew is a story that we are not going to go into in depth in this video, because I have several videos linked in the description, and maybe now you're wondering, if we're not going to go into this topic, why are we talking about it? Well, the answer is in Lebanon. This is because the area we now know as Lebanon was one of the first places on the planet where Christianity spread. In Lebanon, there was also a famous monk named Maron, although, well, he actually operated mostly in the area of Syria. And here we're going to pause to point out that back then, the difference between Syria and Lebanon wasn't so noticeable, and their separation came much later, but we'll talk about that later on. Now, let's return to the story of the monk Maron, whose followers founded the Christian movement whose members are known today as the Maronites, which is where Maronite Christians in Lebanon get their name. To continue with our story, we need to move forward in time, where we're going to talk about someone who claimed to have received a supposed visit from an angel. This person from the Arabian Peninsula said he was visited by Angel Gabriel, Jibril in Arabic. This, and supposedly he transmitted to him the sacred words that he said came directly from the one God, the creator of the cosmos. And he believed that this visit happened, apparently, because all the religions before him had become corrupted over time. And that's why God sent this man, named Muhammad, to remind humanity how to worship the one God and become Muslims. This event and figure, though not taken seriously by us Jews, is why Islam and the Arabic language will come to Lebanon. In addition to being the birthplace of a new religion called Islam, and whose followers violently conquered the entire region, including what is today Lebanon. Continuing our journey through history, we come to the emergence of the Druze religion. This new group, the Druze, settled in the region that used to be Syria and Lebanon. I remind you that in the past, there wasn't always a separation between these two geographic areas. It's still not relevant at this point in history. For now, what I do want to highlight is that the Druze make up 5% of the Lebanese population, making it the second country with the largest Druze population in the world after Syria. Now we have to make an important leap in time to the year 1860, and don't think this date was chosen at random, because this is a fundamental year in the conflicts of Lebanon. 1860, the arrival of the Ottomans. In that year, the Ottoman Empire was controlling the region after it had been changing hands among many empires for a long time. However, it didn't last long because the Ottomans began to decline slowly, and the entire Muslim community also experienced a simultaneous deterioration. At the same time, a conflict began in the region of Lebanon and Syria involving the Christian and Druze religions, which led to a civil war and a series of terrible massacres. In response, the French proclaimed themselves as the protectors of Christianity and decided to intervene militarily in the Middle East. We could say that this was what started this particular relationship between France and Lebanon. Setting aside the conflict with France, I'll return to the Ottoman Empire's intervention, as it had little time left to exist. Due to the outbreak of World War I, in which this empire was practically wiped out by accident. If you want to know more about this event and how all of this helped invent the countries of the Middle East during the 20th century, I'll share a video where I explain this story. Anyway, now let's talk about one of the most unfortunate events in this entire region, which is that during the war, there was a famine in the area of Lebanon, and this crisis caused the death of about 200,000 people. This is equivalent to half of the population that lived there back then, so as if that wasn't enough, the Ottoman side also lost. And this caused the entire Levant region to be handed over on a silver platter to the Western powers that had come to colonize our lands, the division of territories by two European powers. France and Great Britain decided to draw a line to divide the Levant region, leaving the north to France and the south to Great Britain. At first, they were not satisfied with this division, so they had to divide each of their areas again, and it ended up as follows. France divided the north into Syria and Lebanon, while Great Britain divided the south into Transjordan and what was geographically called Palestine, which was a name the Romans had given to Judea in the 2nd century. Since then, Syria and Lebanon have had a historical connection, but Syria has always tried to intervene and take control over it. And here's a new question, and I hope you leave your answer in the comments section. When Syria regains its political stability, do you think it would be possible for it to merge again with Lebanon someday? Who knows, I wouldn't rule it out. But as time went on, France became more closely connected with Lebanon. But with the arrival of World War II, the defeat of the French by the Nazis caused Lebanon to face a new challenge. That challenge was the tensions between Vichy France, which was allied with the Nazis, and the British. As a result of this conflict, the influence of the French in Lebanon was weakened, causing Lebanon to become independent, first in practice and then officially. A new challenge for Lebanon. Although Lebanon was already independent, they faced a new challenge. A challenge that has persisted to this day and is even related to Israel. This new challenge refers to the structural weakness of Lebanon, and this causes the different groups that make up Lebanese society to come into conflict. Throughout this time, the region of Lebanon was made up of different religions, with approximately 50% Christians who themselves were divided between Maronites and Orthodox. The next group are the Muslims, who are the Musulmanes, who make up the majority of the population, and the different minority groups are made up of Sunnis and Shiites, not to mention that there are also Druze who are neither Christians nor Muslims. The main conflict was that the two strongest groups, that is Christians and Muslims, identified with different regions, while the Christians were more oriented toward the west. The Muslims were more Arab, so they reached a solution in which Lebanon would be neither completely Western nor completely Arab. A national pact was formed, not as a written agreement, but by distributing government positions among the religions in this way. The Maronites would hold the presidency. The Sunnis would hold the office of head of government. The Shiites would hold the presidency of parliament, and the Druze would be in charge of the army. In addition, the parliament would always have a composition that favored the Christians. However, this distribution created new questions. For example, what happens if the Shiites want a president? Or if the demographic proportions change? People started asking different questions like, what happens if a neighboring country goes to war and hundreds of thousands of Sunni refugees take shelter in this country? Well, that literally already happened. When Israel won the War of Independence in 1948, about 100,000 Arabs who had started the war against Israel and lost ended up fleeing to Lebanon, and this broke the demographic balance in Lebanon. By the late 1950s, a trend began to spread throughout the Arab world. This trend was led by the president of Egypt, whose name was Gamal Abdel Nasser, and he sought to unify all Arabs under one country. This caused a small civil war in Lebanon between Lebanese Muslims who wanted to join this utopian trend and the Christians. Although in the end, the situation stabilized by the 1960s when Lebanon was actually doing very well, and even Beirut was nicknamed the Paris of the Middle East, the Switzerland of the Middle East. Still, this peace did not last long. By the 1970s, different groups in the country began to fight again because of Palestinian terrorism. This conflict arose because of an armed Palestinian organization that had been expelled from Jordan and moved to Lebanon so they could continue causing chaos in the Middle East. This organization was called Fatah, and with its arrival in Lebanon, a Muslim army emerged that used Lebanon as a terrorist base to attack innocent civilians, and that caused a new civil war to break out in Lebanon. This war was fought on one side by the Christians and on the other by the Muslims. Amid all this chaos caused by the Palestinians' anti-Semitism, Syria took the opportunity to invade Lebanon. At the same time, Israel was being attacked by Palestinian terrorists in Lebanon as usual, so Israel defensively invaded Lebanon to fight against Fatah, which was constantly launching missiles from southern Lebanon against Israel. That's how Israel occupied a part of Lebanon, but later, after several tensions, Israel withdrew, except for a security zone, in order to protect the population in northern Israel. And in this area, a Christian militia went and settled there. Over time, the famous Islamic organization called Hezbollah also emerged. Their goal was to emulate the Iranian Shiite revolution, as well as to fight for the Shiites in the Lebanese civil war. And of course, their objective was to eliminate Israel simply because they wanted to. In the 1990s, tensions decreased a bit and the civil war ended. New millennium, new conflicts. Did you think Lebanon's problems would end there? Of course not. In such a weak and battered country, other nations continue to interfere. For example, the Islamofascist Republic of Iran, which influences Lebanon through Hezbollah. Syria also tries to do so. Sometime later, in the year 2000, a series of events led to what was called the Cedar Revolution, which resulted in Syria's withdrawal from Lebanon. That withdrawal made it seem like Lebanon would finally find a bit of peace. However, Hezbollah began attacking Israel, and they triggered the Second Lebanon War because they kidnapped 2 Israeli soldiers. And this was the reason why Israel found itself needing to enter a new war against Hezbollah, which is actually interesting, because Hezbollah claims that they won the war. You know, they have a mental delusion. You can see how they start all the wars, and in the end, Israel ends up winning. If they left us alone, they wouldn't complain whenever Israel defends itself. By the way, one of my brothers is in the Israeli army right now, in a commando unit fighting in Lebanon. We ask that you pray to Hashem to protect our soldiers and that soon we may see victory for Israel and peace for Jerusalem. Now, even after that war in 2006, the internal tensions in Lebanon did not cease. The factions kept clashing with each other, each one seeking more power and more influence. Until today, the Lebanese parliament is strongly influenced by Hezbollah, that is, by Iran. At this point, I want to ask you, who really has control over Lebanon? Who decides if the country goes to war or not? Is it the government, or maybe a particular party like Hezbollah, the party of Allah? What would happen, for example, if a war broke out in the south of Israel? If that happened, would Lebanon intervene or not? If only one party from Lebanon wanted to get involved in the war, does that mean all of Lebanon would enter the war? In summary, Lebanon is once again under the influence of regional conflicts, with Hezbollah attacking Israel in response to events happening in other countries. But if Israel manages to defeat Hezbollah, would that be the end of all of Lebanon's problems? Personally, I don't think so, because the radical regime in Iran is the cause of all the problems. But that's something that only time will tell.